YouTube! What's going on? Today's video, I'm going to be doing an explanation of how streaming services are taking your favorite shows and movies and kind of sort of monopolizing them. I will be showing you just how my few years of college did not go to complete waste. Thank goodness. Let's get started. Let me get into something more fitting for the tone. And there we go. A little bit more spazzed up. Let's get into it. The streaming industry has transformed how people consume internet on a global scale. What began as a cheaper and more convenient alternative to cable television has evolved into a highly concentrated market by a small number of dominant firms. Today, streaming platforms such as Netflix, Disney, Amazon Prime, HBO Max, Hulu, and Apple TV form an oligopoly. And to qualify my claim, at one point in recent time, I owned each one of these streaming services. For those of you that don't know what a oligopoly is, as a market structure where a few firms hold significant power and influence prices, content, and competition. This concentration reflects on a high level of market concentration where control is held by only a few firms, typically no more than 4. And now I know I didn't just name 4 right there, but just let me cook. An oligopoly exists when a small group of companies dominates an industry and each firm's decisions directly affect the others. Unlike a monopoly, where only one firm controls the market, an oligopoly allows multiple firms to compete through often in limited ways. For example, other brands that do it, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, or Xbox and PlayStation. This structure leads to mutual interdependence, no matter how direct or indirect. Meaning, each company must consider how competitors will respond before making major decisions. But in this context, streaming services don't do that, at least not yet. Nothing directly showing, hey, come on over to our side, pay for our subscription, not theirs. Versus in previous years, you'd get more specific ads or things of that nature, not directly saying who the competition was, but heavily referencing them. Streaming initially disrupted traditional television by offering a large content library at an affordable price. Netflix, the main reason why I am making this video today, gained an early advantage as a first mover. When I was younger, all you could see would be Redbox, Netflix machines, and typically, for those of you that don't know, you go into like a Walmart or King Soopers, whatever, give it some money, it'll spit out whatever copy of the newest movies or that same library in a physical form. Now, through streaming and just being around so long, it has established a brand loyalty and a large subscriber base before competitors even entered the market. No one was really doing streaming like they were doing it. They were the first to do it. Now they're the best to do it, in my opinion. And that's kind of led to Hulu, Disney. Disney owns Hulu, for those of you that don't know. Amazon Prime. HBO. And so on. Now, the main reason that this happened is because Netflix bought HBO. So that's just one less competitor, since now technically it is all just Netflix owned. Now, legally speaking, there's still different entities, so nothing has came upon it yet. But given time, I believe you'll start to see slight shifts. I know I've seen slight shifts of seeing content that was typically only on HBO slowly but surely come on over to Netflix and vice versa from Netflix to HBO. So, over time, I won't be surprised if one of the apps, more than likely HBO, starts to funnel out and become like a Netflix add-on. Or maybe they just liquidize the entire company, take all the content HBO has, and give it straight to Netflix, and maybe give it like a little subtitle like, oh, used to be on HBO. Who knows? One of the defining characteristics of oligopoly is high barriers to entry. In streaming, these barriers include massive startup costs, expensive content licenses, and advanced technological infrastructure. I personally only know of like 2 companies that are really doing relatively well in this new streaming service world, and that is Sony and Peacock. Those 2 services oftentimes have to pay for a few Marvel, Disney titles, but Sony specifically is the only company that has the rights to certain Marvel-based characters, one of the biggest being Spider-Man. And this allows them to skew how Disney produces Spider-Man related content in the Marvel Universe. If you're not familiar with it, Sony originally bought some of the Marvel characters when Marvel was originally just owned by Stan Lee and wasn't too profitable, far before Disney came in and said, hey, I want the rest of it. Let me get that for a few $100 million. And now that investment obviously made them really well, but since those characters weren't sold with like a all or nothing deal, you got to deal with like fragmentation in your own universe, often creating a little bit of struggles, making the full-on cinematic universe that they've done today. Smaller firms just can't complete at that scale whatsoever. They can't spend millions of dollars on production rights of a character that they do not have complete trust in, like Disney could do with buying Marvel. Which means that the dominant platforms maintain long-term control. Whoever has more capital, more resources, more ability, and like less drawback if they fail because they have so much capital, it reduces who can really contest them. Meaning the potential of competition is weak and unlikely. In oligopolies, firms are strategically interdependent, meaning each platform's action influences the others. As soon as you see a price increase on one platform, you'll see a price increase on another. Ad-supported subscription tiers. Oftentimes you'll see Hulu with ads, Hulu with ESPN, but with ads, ESPN, no ads. Hulu with ESPN, Disney Plus, but with ads, so on and so forth. And what this does is make a strategy for how they appear across multiple platforms at the same time. This behavior reflects price leadership, where one dominant firm sets the trend that others follow. Oftentimes, that's been Netflix or Disney. Rather than competing aggressively, firms engage in non-price competition, focusing on content and branding instead of lower subscription fees. This approach stabilizes profits while limiting consumer benefits. All that is to say is if it's not a price increase, then it will be something else in regards to what content you'll be seeing and how desirable that is to everyone, and they own the bottleneck and how much you have to pay or not pay. So let's see what they all can get away with, if that makes sense. Streaming platforms compete primarily through exclusive content, like I was using before, Star Wars, Stranger Things, using these original series and the franchise ownership to attract subscribers. This differentiation reduces price elasticity of demand, as consumers are less sensitive to price changes when content is unavailable practically any elsewhere. Let me say it like this. If you wanted to watch one of the first 3 Star Wars films, but you don't know anyone that possibly has a DVD copy or some type of way to play it, either or, you're out of luck. What are you gonna have to do? Go to Disney Plus, and buy that subscription. Then you can watch it. Or maybe you're able to find someone on the internet. Once again, you're able to get the disc, but not a DVD player. Oftentimes, in the world we live in today, you're either able to find one or the other, not typically both. And regardless, depending on just how badly you want to watch it, if you were wanting to, you could probably find and buy a copy of Star Wars that came out in the 70s, this specific version. Buy a DVD player and then watch it. Now you'd have to do that, buy all 3 movies, buy that DVD player. This could set you back who knows how far back. Versus you pay a one-time subscription of about like $17.99, $16.99, something like that. And you're able to watch all 3 of those movies pretty much right there. As long as you have a streaming device, that is. Now, a lot of people nowadays should have some streaming device. If you have simply just a phone, that's a streaming device. If you have Apple TV, Google Play, or Smart TV, any of these things, and start. Any of these things have the capability of streaming Star Wars. Now, there's a little bit more broadness to this because not all movies, I assume, the consumer wants to see, at least at my age, are in the 70s. Newer films and whatnot are a little bit more regularly available, but you get the point. So what I mentioned previously, for consumers, this streaming oligopoly brings both convenience and higher costs. Price subscriptions rise and content is spread across the platforms, requiring multiple payments, multiple subscriptions typically. The only few people that now, once again, have a chokehold on a vast majority of those services, the content and the service, it would be Netflix and Disney. Now, they own, if I were to put like a slight number on it, probably in the realm of 60% of all content pretty much out there. Now, don't quote me on that. I'm not too much into statistics. I was an econ major, so if I really wanted to, probably could figure out the numbers, but no. This reflects consumer surplus erosion, where consumers receive less value for the price they pay compared to earlier periods. Streaming increasingly resembles cable television, but without bundled pricing benefits. Firms rely on inelastic demand, knowing consumers are unlikely to cancel all subscriptions at once. You don't want to be left out there not being able to watch at least one of your favorite shows once again. The oligopoly structure also affects creators and industry workers. With only a few dominant buyers of premium content, platforms exert monopoly power, giving them leverage over wages, contracts, and creative control over anything. This imbalance has contributed to labor disputes and shorter content lifespans. Typically, you gotta make something new and then instantly follow it up, kind of like Fallout, kind of like Stranger Things before they took this long hiatus before their previous season, kind of like Star Wars, now able to make one movie right after the other. People want more. They want and want. And this kind of prioritizes efficiency versus creativity. The revenue sharing models lack transparency, reflecting information asymmetry between platforms and creators. Despite its drawbacks, the streaming oligopoly offers some benefits. Large platforms can fund expensive productions. Greatest example of that, once again, is Disney. They spend the most money, Avatar and Avengers, and they also make the most money with just those two titles. Those two are the highest grossing films in history as it stands. Now, I don't know if it's Avatar, Way of Water, or Ash and Burn, whichever one is at top, and then Avengers Endgame, and then Avengers Infinity, and then the more statement pieces like your Titanics or stuff of that nature fall below, but are owned by Disney or Netflix. So they fall down a little bit lower, but search it up. These capabilities rise, excuse me, along with the endless library that each platform has, which is a stark contrast to previous ways to own shows, movies, etc., which was waiting to buy the DVD. Now, when I was young, DVDs were everything. You were able to put them anywhere, anytime, able to watch that show or movie. Now, you just need a streaming device, which is even more regularly available than a DVD player and a TV. These capabilities rise from capital intensity, which allows firms to take financial risk that a smaller competitor cannot afford. Like I was telling you earlier, Sony, Peacock, able to do it since they're relatively big companies, but not able to do it at the same scale. Unless if they are absolutely sure, which is why Sony is having an absolute death grip on all things Spider-Man created. Oligopolies can also encourage innovation through dynamic efficiency, where firms improve products and technology over time rather than competing solely on price. Typically doesn't happen. But another great example of that is all Marvel Avengers and all Avatar series. They did get better from the very first one, which I was young when both of them came out, to the ones that are coming out now. Each movie got a bigger budget because the previous movie did so well. Now,
That's a pro and a con, I know, but just the way it's going to have to be. In conclusion, the streaming industry is a modern oligopoly dominated by a small number of powerful corporations. While consumers enjoy across the high quality entertainment, they face raising prices, limited alternatives, and increasing fragmentation. These outcomes reflect allocative inefficiency where market outcomes do not maximize customer welfare. Streaming appears to offer unlimited choices, but beneath the surface, its shape is demanded by control. Strategic behavior and concentrated economic power, demonstrating how market structure influences everyday consumer experiences. That's my deep dive of the streaming world. That's this week's Zap Sunday. Please like, comment, and subscribe. See ya next Zapped Sunday.